In the late 19th century, when India was under British colonial rule, the government of Delhi faced a serious cobra problem. Venomous cobras were a genuine public health threat. The solution was logical: pay a bounty for every dead cobra. People would kill cobras, collect the reward, and the cobra population would decline. The program worked, initially. Then locals realized it was far easier to breed cobras than to hunt wild ones hiding in cracks in walls and shadowy corners. Cobra farms sprang up. Breeders raised snakes, killed them, and turned in the bodies for bounty money. When the British government realized what was happening and canceled the bounty program, the cobra breeders, who were no longer being compensated, released their now worthless snakes. The cobra population ended up larger than it had been before the program began. The Cobra Effect, now a standard term in economics and policy analysis, describes the specific category of second-order consequence where a solution to a problem produces an incentive that makes the problem worse. The Cobra Effect occurs because we fail to examine our actions and policies and fully understand their secondary and tertiary consequences. When looking for solutions to problems, we create one and forget to ask, and then what? And then what? Is the question that second-order thinking requires. It is the question that every plan, every policy, and every intervention implicitly skips when it is first implemented, not through negligence, but through the specific cognitive challenge of modeling the behavior of systems that respond to interventions by changing in response to them. This episode is about that cognitive challenge and about the specific domains where second-order effects are most reliably underestimated and most consequentially misunderstood. The social media recommendation algorithm is the clearest contemporary example of a second-order effect at scale. The first-order intention of a recommendation algorithm is engagement. Show users content they are likely to engage with, and they will spend more time on the platform. The measurement is simple: clicks, watch time, reactions, shares. The optimization is clear: maximize the metrics that represent engagement. The second-order effect, which was not invisible in principle, but which was not modeled adequately before the systems were deployed at scale, is that the content most likely to generate engagement is content that produces strong emotional reactions, and the content that produces the strongest emotional reactions is not necessarily content that is accurate, balanced, or conducive to social cohesion. Good intentions establish a desired goal, but do not guarantee that a chosen action will achieve it. In complex systems, actions trigger second-order effects, perverse incentives, and unintended consequences that can overwhelm the original purpose. The engagement metric was not wrong as a proxy for user value in the early days of social media, when the platform served a smaller, more homogeneous audience. It became wrong, diverged from user value and from social value, as the platform scaled to billions of users, and as the optimization engine's power to find engagement-maximizing content grew faster than the understanding of what engagement-maximizing content was producing downstream. The third-order effect, the political polarization, the mental health consequences for young users, the epidemics of misinformation that preceded real-world events, was even further removed from the original intervention. The algorithm was designed to maximize engagement. The engagement optimization produced a content feed that maximized emotional reaction. The emotional reaction feed produced polarization and misinformation amplification. The polarization and misinformation produced social and political consequences that the algorithm designers had neither intended nor anticipated. Have you ever made a decision or implemented a policy that produced a second-order consequence you hadn't modeled? A consequence that was directly produced by the decision but through a chain of effects you hadn't traced? Leave a comment. In my experience, the second-order effects matter more than the first. I've seen great visions die because the spreadsheets told a different story. People were asked to embrace change while still being paid to resist it. The corporate equivalent of the Cobra Effect is the Wells Fargo case examined in an earlier episode. But the second-order thinking framework adds a dimension that the incentive structure analysis doesn't fully capture. The Wells Fargo leadership's first-order intention was genuine: build deep customer relationships through cross-selling. The first-order effect of the cross-selling metric was genuine: more products sold to existing customers. The second-order effect, that the metric could be met through account openings that didn't require customer consent, was not modeled because the model was built around the first-order intention and the first-order effect. The question, "and then what?" applied to the cross-selling metric would have produced: employees who cannot find willing customers to cross-sell will cross-sell to unwilling customers to meet the metric. That question, asked before the metric was deployed at scale, would have identified the specific second-order effect that the regulatory investigation later documented. The question wasn't asked. The second-order effect arrived. When we hear about incentives, we should think beyond the first order. For example, we should pause and examine the unintended consequences of subsidizing corn production. Will subsidies lead to overconsumption of high-fructose corn syrup? Will they incentivize farmers to feed corn to farm animals that don't naturally digest grains? Will subsidies create a barrier to food imports, ultimately increasing prices? Will relations with trade partners deteriorate? Will supply gluts be created, leading to food waste? Each of these is a second or third-order consequence that was not the first-order intention of corn subsidies. Each of them is a real documented consequence. Each of them would have been visible as a possibility if the question, "and then what?" had been applied to the first-order intention before implementation. If the specific practice, "and then what?" applied systematically through 3 iterations, is what makes this channel worth your time, the like is the direct signal. The employees who work in organizations producing second-order effects they didn't anticipate are almost never the people who designed the first-order intervention. They are the people executing the policy, the metric, the incentive, while the second-order consequences of that execution are accumulating in domains they have no visibility into. The social media engineers who built the engagement optimization algorithm were not building a polarization engine. They were building a recommendation system. The polarization was a consequence of the recommendation system's optimization, not of the polarization engine's design. The engineers who wrote the algorithm code had no functional visibility into whether the content it was surfacing was producing the social consequences that congressional hearings later documented, because the connection between the code and the social consequence was 3 steps removed, and the monitoring systems were designed to track the first-order metric, not the third-order consequence. This is the human dimension of second-order effects in organizations. The people closest to the intervention are the people furthest from the consequences it produces through secondary and tertiary chains. The cobra breeders were responding rationally to the bounty system. They had no visibility into, or responsibility for, the eventual population increase when the bounty stopped. The Wells Fargo branch associates were responding rationally to the cross-selling metric. They had no visibility into the regulatory consequences that would be produced at the firm level. The people who designed the interventions, and who bear the most analytical responsibility for the second-order effects, were the furthest from the daily execution that produced those effects. The practical tool for second-order thinking is not a complex analytical framework. It is the question, "and then what?" applied iteratively, 3 times, minimum, to every significant policy, metric, incentive, or intervention. First iteration: if we implement this policy, what will happen? The intended first-order effect. Second iteration: if the first-order effect occurs as planned, what will the people subject to it do in response? The second-order behavioral response. Third iteration: if the second-order behavioral response occurs, what does that produce in the system the policy is trying to affect? The third-order consequence. For the cobra bounty, first order, people kill cobras for bounty money. Second order, people breed cobras to maximize bounty collection. Third order, program ends, cobras released, population larger than baseline. For the engagement algorithm, first order, algorithm surfaces high engagement content. Second order, highest engagement comes from emotionally activating content. Third order, emotionally activating content feed amplifies polarization and misinformation. For the cross-selling metric, first order, employees sell more products. Second order, employees unable to sell to willing customers sell to unwilling ones. Third order, 3.5 million unauthorized accounts, $185 million, fine. The 3-iteration question is available before every intervention. It is rarely applied. The second-order effects it would have revealed are the effects that subsequent inquiries, investigations, and post-mortems document with clarity that was unavailable, or simply not applied, at the moment of implementation. The next episode looks at the Plan B that became the only plan worth keeping. This content was developed with the support of artificial intelligence tools and underwent human review, editorial curation, and approval before publication. The analysis presented here is strictly educational and philosophical in nature, grounded in behavioral psychology and classical Stoicism.